Hello and welcome to the 33rd episode of Tailoring in Conversation. In this series, I'll be talking to tailors, business owners, cloth merchants, and other industry participants from all around the globe to gain a better insight into their worlds. My guest for today is Joe Baker-Waters. Joe is a bespoke tailor and fashion designer currently based in Los Angeles, United States. Originally trained at Gieves and Haute, Joe has worked for companies like Calvin Klein, Marc Jacobs, and Anna Sui, to name a few. She's also the author of Pattern Cutting Techniques for Ladies Tailored Jackets, available on the Crowwood Press, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. In our conversation today, we're going to be talking about her background, the process of writing a book, innovation in tailoring, and much more. So without further ado, let's get started. Well, Joe, thank you very much for being here with me. I've been looking forward since the beginning of the week to do this interview with you. Let me just simply start by asking you how you're doing and where you are.
Okay, yeah, I'm very well, thank you. And at the moment, I'm in Los Angeles. It's where I sort of reside at the moment. I moved to the States about 10 years ago for a job at Calvin Klein. So I was sponsored to come out to the States.
Right.
Which was great because I've sort of stayed on after that. And I'm sort of between the UK and the US, but I'm sort of at the moment, I have a house in LA, and that's where I'm
Do you travel often to the UK?
Yeah, I'm back for at least 3 months a year, 3 or 4 months.
Okay, that's a decent interval.
I like that too. I think it's important to still sort of have that sort of, get back in touch with your
connection, your
connections, and actually I do miss it as well. So I think it's just finding the right balance between the two. I'm trying to make that work anyway. In the next few
how
years.
do you find LA? How do you find LA compared to the life in the UK?
It's a very nice lifestyle, I think. Very different in that point of view, and it's very sunny. It does get cold, but it's never grey, so it's a little bit different because you get a lot of light here, which is very different to the UK. I have to say I do miss the rain a lot. I literally, when it rains and I'm back in England, I'm like sat in my mum's garden, just like having it rain on me because I love it so much and miss it. But it's nice. It is a nice lifestyle, but you have to travel for work. It's very difficult for work here, and the business here. A lot of the film industry, they send their work to the UK to do the costumes. Yes. So there's not much film work here. And then the clients that are here, they tend to go more for ready-to-wear because it's faster than bespoke. So I feel like I just use LA as a base because it's a more cost-effective city to live in when you compare it to New York. I lived in New York for 8 years, but I had a job that covered me and was sort of helping me to sort of have a studio in Brooklyn, which sort of helped with all that. But then once that went during the pandemic and I moved to California, now it's like I just sort of tried to reduce my cost of living a little bit. So
understandably.
I think that's the most key thing, is that always the first things to suffer in a pandemic are the arts, whether you're a tailor, whether you're in film, whether you're a musician, a fashion designer, an artist. The first thing is just, the arts always really hurt and really suffer. So that's why I ended up here, because it just meant that I could consolidate everything. In New York, I had an apartment, a storage unit, a workspace. But by moving to LA, I have it all under one roof, and it's slashed my overheads in half. So
that's a lot nicer.
So it seemed like the right thing to do at the time, and also to sort of get out of the city after the first sort of pandemic. It was a little crazy in New York. It turned into a bit of a film type situation.
I can imagine.
little crazy, but so that's why I ended up in LA, and I like it because I can do my work here. But it's all my sort of clients are really sort of spread out all over the place. They're in New York or in England. They're not really here. But this being here allows me to work and still sort of, you know, I think it's a great entrepreneurial spirit here because it's more affordable for artists to sort of set up here. It's a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, for some of the listeners and the viewers who may not be familiar with your work, can you just give a brief overview of when you started, where you did your training, and what sort of places have you worked? Because you've not only worked on traditional Savile tailoring houses, but you've also worked for fashion brands. So if you could give us a brief tour, and then I'll go into some of the topics that I'd like to cover with you.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I guess at 16, I realized that I wanted to work in fashion or art, and I decided to do a diploma in fashion design and a diploma in art history. And even though I'm very passionate about art, I sort of realized that there's like a very few amount of people who are cherry-picked every generation to sort of really get into that industry and be really successful, I feel like. So I felt like, yes, I love fashion too, and tailoring. So I thought, well, I'll do a fashion design diploma first to get started and sort of see where that takes me. And actually, I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. And for me, that was the first exposure I had to like-minded people. I grew up in a sort of a small town in Birmingham in England, a very working class background. So I hadn't had much exposure to people who were interested in the same things as me.
What got you into fashion?
I was just interested in it. I just liked, I was always interested in art and drawing and making clothes and writing. So I think overall it was the whole arts that I love. And I think I realized that unless you come from a very sort of wealthy background, I think you have to work in multiple fields to supplement an income. If you don't have, yes, I come from a working class background and yes, I'm educated, but I think if you don't have that source of constant stream of financial support, then you have to find alternative ways to sort of generate an income to survive, to keep your overheads going, and then use those platforms to sort of keep going. So I realized that at a young age. So yes, I loved art, and I realized that was like really like interesting to me. So I did the history of art because I thought, well, at least that'll give me my foundation, so I understand where, you know, where everything, where we've been, where we're going, and you know, and moving forward from that. And then I did the fashion design diploma. And once I did the fashion design diploma, I enjoyed being at art college so much, meeting like-minded people. I felt like finally I found people that I can sort of relate to, at least. You know, and then I decided to do a degree in fashion design after that, which was 4 years. And I went up north to Northumbria University. And then I came out, I graduated, and that's where I'd say I started to develop more my interest in tailoring, because I think I was just a bit of a tomboy at heart, and I used to like wearing guys' clothes. So I was really interested in menswear and men's clothing. And I just wanted to improve that knowledge more and learn the skills that you need so that I could execute my vision. So I sort of went in this like other direction then when I was doing my fashion degree, where I wanted to tailoring, and all of a sudden that became my obsession.
Were you introduced to tailoring during your fashion design?
Yeah, I was trying to create beautiful blazers as a student. And I did an okay job considering I had very little tailoring experience, and my tutors were like, oh, these are beautiful. I'm like, no, it's not perfect. It's not good enough. It's not enough. So I was my own worst enemy, really, when it came to critiquing my work. So I, as soon as I graduated, I knew I wanted to do a tailoring apprenticeship, and I knew that the only place I could go to for that was Savile Row. Wasn't easy at that time to sort of start to get an apprenticeship, and you know, I would cold call different shops on the street.
What year was this?
This was 2000.
2000.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm old.
That's a while back.
I told you I'm old.
I was 9 back then.
yeah. So it was tough, and I kept writing letters to everybody expressing my passion and interest, and I never heard anything. Or there was a couple of guys I spoke to, and they were like, "We don't need anybody, and you don't have enough experience." So I took a design assistant job, and I interned during my university years. We have to do an industrial placement, and because I chose to go to New York. Why not? And it was paid. So I thought, well, okay. I did the internship at Anna Sweet, and then after I graduated, because I didn't immediately get into Savile Row, I took a design assistant job, so I could just keep working in design, keep developing my philosophy. Obviously, I'm passionate about tailoring, but I think it's important to sort of develop a style.
Did you find it useful in technical terms as well, in actual practical skills? So what sort of things would you say were key skills that you learned during your design assistant years, let's say?
I would say organization. Massively organization, time management, simple things, very simple things.
Right.
And then from a more creative point of view, I would say color, fabric, putting colors and fabrics together, developing that eye for fashion. Which I would definitely say has, for sure, even though Anna Sweet, totally different aesthetic to anything I've ever done. It's very bohemian, very feminine, very textile oriented and print oriented. So the opposite of sort of what I do, but it's an opportunity. And at that time, I couldn't get into Savile Row at that time, but I still kept writing letters to the shops. I wouldn't give up. I think I wrote 3 times to Gieves and Haute before.
Now, when you say you wrote, you actually wrote
and posted a letter?
Yeah.
I'm showing my age. Yeah, this is back in the day.
Yeah. Well, you didn't use a feather and ink, so it's not that wild.
But I mailed letters, and I had a response from the bespoke manager at Gieves and Haute. Basically said to me, "We have quite an eccentric Spanish coat maker. Would you be interested to come in and have a trial with him?" He's like, he doesn't speak the best English, you know, so we have to see whether this will work. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. We'll make it work. We'll find a way.
I'll learn Spanish.
Yeah, I was like, sure, I'll learn Spanish. Fine. So that's how it started, and that's what sort of brought me back to London then, because I was like, immediately I was like gone from actually, came back to London, and I took a risk, like a massive risk, because it was a trial. It wasn't exactly a job offer.
Right.
So it was a risk. And, you know, sometimes you just have to take those risks. Sometimes they don't pay off. This one it did. But I met him, and then we sort of really had a lovely conversation. We really bonded. We actually, very, very sweet man, and we had a good chat, and I worked with him for the day, and then they invited me to come back and work a week. Which they said they would pay. See, then it was very low, but they said they would pay because I think they still were like just sort of testing, be careful, and they sort of really highly revered Andrew. So they were just like, we want to be careful that he has the right person.
Yeah, yeah.
With him, and I think I had a good attitude, so I was always going to be the right person. I think that's the most important thing. If you've got a good attitude and you're willing to learn and just sort of ask questions and that helps. So I did that week and then got offered the apprenticeship. So that's
right.
where I landed and stayed there for 5 years. And after winning the Golden Shears, I had the opportunity to work with Joe Casely-Hayford, who was overseeing Gieves. At the time, he was, which was the runway stuff. And because I was still interested in fashion, so this is the conflicting part, because I love tailoring and I love the craft and I love the art form. But actually, what I loved about fashion was the development of new styles and innovation and different shapes. So it's bespoke just is continuously classic.
Yes.
Classic formula. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think for me, I guess I still had that sort of sensibility in me. The fashion background, and because I wanted to bring in more color and interesting fabrics and proportion and shape and play with shoulder proportions, lapels, fits, volume. It was never that. It was always very regimented, which I loved that for a very, very long time. Don't get me wrong. But I did start to feel like I need to do something a bit more creative again, but with this craft. So I had the opportunity to go progress, but I had the opportunity to work with Joe for a bit, which was great because we were doing more sort of high fashion bespoke pieces, menswear, and they would show at Paris Fashion Week in Paris, and we would go out for the show. So that sort of reignited my interest in fashion again.
So you're going back and forth from being a technician to being an artist, technician, artist.
Yeah, and I think that's what happened, and it's not that I sort of, maybe I did get bored. I hate to say that, but I just sort of wanted to do. I think I still had that artistic sensibility in my mind to push boundaries and be innovative and more creative.
Well, I have a question, because when I was on Savile and I was doing my apprenticeship, I myself come from kind of like an artistic background. I did design school. My parents were both artists. So I had kind of like this world of art in my mind. And when I moved to Savile, I very quickly understood that this is a very technical job. And most of the problems that you are solving with creativity are engineering problems more than problems of perception or vision or creating a scene or whatsoever. And at the same time, I kind of like did have similar feelings to what you're describing, some desire to bring the art into this technical and engineering kind of like work. How do you see these two kind of like balance together? Because there are people who do this type of work because they like to preserve a craft that has been around for years, and they'd like to continue that as it has been continuing forever. But then there are other people who I kind of like tend to align with a bit more, who like the craft, who like the tradition, but they are just itching to innovate something, do something new, and not so out of proportion new that you are kind of like bringing elephant trunks into a suit or something. But you know what I mean. So how would you describe that for in your experience?
I think that kind of goes into haute couture, where it's sort of high fashion, but it's handmade for months and months. It's like very special pieces. Right. So for me, that's what haute couture is. Paris, Chanel, Dior, not the runway ready-to-wear collections, but the actual atelier who can make. They have the tailoring division, and then they have the dresses division for girls, and they have the men's version in suits and tailoring. But that's how I see. That's really, it's haute couture.
Do you think that the skills that are required for someone to work in the haute couture world are a lot more demanding in terms of creative problem solving than for someone who is doing traditional menswear?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? It just cut out a little.
Yes. So do you think that the skills of creative problem solving are kind of like a bit more demanding in the haute couture world compared to the traditional menswear? Because, you tend to work with materials or designs that you're not always working with when you're making just men's suit or even women's suits in the classical sense.
Yeah, it is more demanding, and it takes twice as long because of that. So that's why it has the price tag that it has. It's quite elitist. But it takes twice as long to do because it's not the same similar fabrics. You're trying out new systems, new cutting techniques, and it does take a lot longer to do. So you have to accommodate that time that it takes into these pieces.
Would you say that the people who are trained in the couture world are trained right from the beginning in that world, or do they usually kind of like have different backgrounds and they just tend to find a job there and continue developing? How are apprenticeships in that world? What should I imagine?
I think a lot of them are come from in-house. I'm sure there's some which come from outside if they're exceptional and they get through the trial, but I think that they would be trained in-house, pretty much like on Savile.
I see. Okay. Now, I know that you teach and you are very much an artistic person. Just looking at your Instagram, there's art everywhere. Yes. And one of the things that we know about art is that it tends to shape our thoughts and viewpoints, and it kind of like helps us to see things in a new light. Having that background yourself and teaching fashion to other students as well, and being a tailor, so having the technical aspect, where do you see the role of art in tailoring? Is there any room for it at all, or is it some sort of a faraway dream that we may kind of like aspire to one day see? But how would you say art plays a role in traditional tailoring, and where can it play a role?
For the inspirational process, I for me, it's taking colors, it's taking textures, fabric, again, moving away from the norm of bespoke tailoring, which is taking it into more of a couture realm. But I think it's more as an aspirational and inspirational tool. That's how I use it, and I actually use my own trimmings and all the reference visuals I have to create artworks afterwards. So everything gets used, nothing scrapped, so to create artworks as well, just because that's what I do, whether it's relevant or whether it is just a faraway dream, probably. But I do take a lot from that, and I think I kind of need that for the soul a little bit. I think.
Well, I've noticed one of the things I saw looking at your work is you and I don't know if this is what you intend, but it was kind of like how I was looking at it. What I noticed was it seems as if you tend to play around with what sort of characters you can create or portray by the type of designs that you bring into the tailoring world and actually execute on those designs with the tailoring skills that you have. Would you say that you tend to look at it in that way, like how can I create certain types of characters or moods of characters with the clothing that I'm designing?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always a character in there, but there's multiple influences in everything, from like 1930s cutting techniques to like, I don't know, 18 late 18th century cutting techniques. So there's a real mix of influences, and the type of person I think who would want to wear these blazers is someone with a very sort of defined, strong point of view. I think it's a very sort of specific. I think that's why a lot of the people who come to see me for blazers, they come for that. The people that I make for, that's what they're looking for. That particular cut, which is strange to me because, you know, the role of a bespoke tailor is actually to develop the individual's style.
Yeah.
Interestingly, so I which is what appealed to me about bespoke tailoring, because I like the originality of it, because it is completely individual to that person and their taste. But I think what I realized is that over the years is that I didn't like everyone's taste.
Yes.
and that's the truth. And that's where I landed with it, was like, well, actually, I don't like your taste. So like, here's the taste that I think you should have. It's like really, I don't know what that is. Fascist tailoring.
Well, it's very interesting. Because you know, this has probably been an ongoing thing. But in the last 2 years, just before the pandemic, many young people like myself did their apprenticeship, did their kind of like few years wherever they were doing it, and then just went out to try and establish something on their own. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, what does something like that do to tailoring if that's happening on a massive scale? Imagine that that's happening in all the different countries as well. But what you're saying now is giving me another insight, which is you are almost kind of like a couture house in one person. So if someone goes to a couture house for a very specific style and look, and I'm not talking about a house style, but really design-oriented bespoke, well, they come to you, and you're giving them a look which is classic, but it is designed classic. It has a bit more fashion in it. And probably if a lot of other people do that, then there isn't couture and then bespoke here, but there is couture, bespoke, and couture in the middle somewhere, you know, where you go to someone for a very specific look, but you can also go to just pure bespoke for the classics. Would you say that that's kind of like how you see it as well?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I think more and more people are going out on their own. And I think that's a good thing too, because I think we need sort of fresh blood, out. It's been so strictly the same, whether it's like the couture houses in Paris or all the shops on Savile Row. I think you need those individuals who are sort of pushing the craft forward, and obviously still respectfully and keeping with the traditions, but giving it sort of some sort of design edge as well. So I think you need those individuals, and I think that is the way forward. I just think that you might have to think about like multiple sources of income, because, you know, when you know, it is tough starting out that way and not having the protection of the big store or the tailor shop, your house. So you have to, you know, find multiple ways to work and sort of, you know, cover, so that you can continue to do your craft and continue to see your clients and keep going. And I said that right at the beginning. I realized from a young age I was probably going to have to do multiple sort of mediums, whether it's teaching, whether it's writing, whether it's fashion design, whether it's pattern cutting, or whether it's bespoke tailoring, or whether it's working, you know, that was bespoke tailoring working for shops on the row, or whether it's my own customers. So it's like you're this working for everybody actually, or everything and everyone. To try and keep the business going.
Yeah.
During quiet periods,
Mm.
the industry is very volatile. When it's
Yeah.
good, it's good, and when it's
Mm-hmm.
bad, it's shocking.
Mm.
So,
Well, to go a bit back about what you said about when you were working as a design assistant, yes, design assistant, and you said one of the most well two of the important things that you mentioned were you learned how to organize things and you learned time management. Can you unpack the organization part a little bit? What exactly did you learn to organize? Because organization is a big thing, right? You can organize so many different things. What were the key things that you think you learned there to organize, which you continue to develop as you moved through your careers, let's say?
well, for example, I would have to research images for the collection,
Mm-hmm.
inspirational images,
Mm-hmm.
old and new. So we would
Mm-hmm.
have thousands of images in a room that would cover the
Mm-hmm.
walls to
Yeah.
inspire the collection and things
Yeah.
pinned on the wall. And then if that wasn't organized, then you would lose track. For example, Anna could come in and say, I want this image, and this image in a room full of thousands of images.
Right.
And obviously those all had to be digitized and kept
Mm.
safe in a folder in an online, like we had like a share drive.
Yeah.
So we would organize all those images to
Mm-hmm.
make it easier to find them,
Mm-hmm.
because just like that, Anna could come in and be like, I want this and this because I want to
Mm-hmm.
take something else I want to do, and I need you to put it together
Mm-hmm.
into a spread for me by the end, like by tomorrow or by
Yeah.
the end of
Yeah.
tomorrow. So if you're spending like hours, because you would pull thousands and thousands of images
Mm-hmm.
trying to locate that image, you're sat there going through multiple JPEGs. You had to be really organized, and
Yeah.
it's very basic, sort of
Mm-hmm.
organizing files, numbering them, and sort of grouping them to make it easier to locate files quicker in
Mm-hmm.
the process, because it's a very fast environment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, and there's just learning to sort of manage your time to a calendar schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and managing multiple projects at the same time. You would be designing the next collection while going through production for the
Mm-hmm.
last collection. So you were constantly working on, I feel like, multiple seasons at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
which is tough as an assistant, because you up until that point you're used to just working on one collection, and that was
Mm-hmm.
tough at university, just getting the one collection done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're working on multiple seasons. So I think that actually set me up quite well
Mm-hmm.
to sort of multitask,
I
actually,
see. Yeah.
which is really, really important, because
Mm-hmm.
now, like I said, I work for a lot of people, and
Mm-hmm.
I always worked for a lot of people. Even after leaving Gieves, I was
Mm-hmm.
teaching,
Mm-hmm.
I was working for designers in London, still making for 2 shops on Savile Row. Like, that's a lot of work.
Yes, that
um,
is. It
it,
is.
it's juggling. I guess I didn't have much time off, and
Mm-hmm.
it was boring during that period, but I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
out
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
That's how it is. It sort of teaches you to manage multiple tasks and cope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is the good foundation that I got from that.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that you would have learned the same skills if you didn't work for someone else, but you just started to do things on your own? Would you have had the same opportunity and the same insights and probably the same trainings in terms of managing your time and organizing things as you would have working for someone else?
Um, I know definitely for myself, I wouldn't have. I'd have been really just, if I'd have just started off working for myself, I feel like I'd have been very all over the place and a bit disorganized.
Mm-hmm.
But because you're under that pressure of being in a big job, you
Yeah.
sort of have to uh, fix it quickly, whatever you're working on, and do it
Yeah.
like just do it fast.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think in Gieves, no, because I was just working for one cutter, and I once I finished working for Andrew, I was working my own jobs, and working for the same cutter. So it wasn't like I was sort of having that exposure to at that point, because I was employed. It was only
Yes.
when I became self-employed, because that was when I'd been working for Joe at Gieves, and I met Richard Nicol, who was a London designer at that time, and he was just starting up his business, and I really liked him. I wanted to work for him, and he just loved the fact that I was a tailor, and he wanted to do cool stuff with it, and I wanted to do cool stuff with it. So I was like, okay, let's work together, but I'm still going to have to do other stuff as well, because I have to still, pay to live in London, and so he didn't have a lot of money to pay me, but I just liked him so much, and I loved what he wanted. We shared a similar mindset, so I really wanted to work for him, even though he had no staff, and in the beginning it was just interns and just me and him. But I think I didn't get that experience until I became self-employed. So whilst I was employed, no, because I was sort of protected. And yes, you still have to meet the deadline and make the blazers for when they need to be ready, but you don't have the stress of multiple people hassling you for work like I did when I was self-employed. That
does make sense. You've probably, having had all these jobs, I can imagine you've had thousands of times a moment where you were like, I have to do this, but I have no idea what I have to do. So I just know that there is this end result, or there is this end vision that I have to achieve. How did you deal with things that were like, first timers, but you still had to be quick, you had to be accurate, you had to kind of like do it on a budget, or I don't know, whatever that may be. How do you know what to do when you don't know what to do, basically, is what I'm trying to ask. Or how did you manage that?
Probably, I don't know, like, depends what the project is, but I guess, dare I say, winging it? Dare I say, I guess just studying. If there was something I wasn't sure about, I would reach out to anybody that I knew who might know that, if there was something that I felt wasn't. But I guess I just learned on the job if there was something like that. Made a few mistakes, definitely. But you learn from the mistakes, and then you move on to different places, and then it's sort of it sort of rectifies itself through time.
Did you have a lot of, and I mean this in the best sense, did you have a lot of confidence in the fact that even if I haven't done it, even if I don't know what I'm doing, I still know that I can make it happen? Did you have that, or what were you kind of like hesitant? You had that.
I believe that if you put your mind to it, I think you can do anything. I really believe that. And I think that, I think if you sort of study that particular area as well and do your research, if you've already got that skill set in place, I mean, if it's something completely brand new, like being I don't know, as an astronaut, that's different. But I'm just talking about within the industry.
Yes.
I just think that if you have that skill set already in place and that experience, then it's actually quite easy to sort of learn new things quickly once you get past the hurdle of having the experience and getting through an apprenticeship. I found that it got easier. When I first became self-employed, it was tough because some of the things I was working on, I remember being awake for days, not being able to sleep, trying to get pieces ready for shows that were these amazing pieces, and being really stressed, and still finishing it before it went down the runway, because there was this one blazer that I draped a bow. It had like a grown-on piece of silk from the lapel, so it's like a huge lapel that was draped into a bow. But I literally worked on it for 72 hours for Richard without any sleep. And then I could do that. Not so much now. But back then I was right up until I was sweating. And that's one example where I think that I was really, really like worried, because I couldn't get the bow to, it was so heavy, the weight. And we were running out of time, which is a lot with these shows that, sometimes you run out of time and you're like, we're going to have to develop this for next season because there's just not enough time to get this right. But we were desperate to do it because it was the showpiece, and there weren't enough people to help. So I was trying to finish it, and I was hand stitching it backstage, still trying to get.
Oh man!
And then Richard was like, "It looks great. It looks amazing." And I'm like, I'm not sure, because I'm like shaking because I've not slept properly and I'm not thinking in my right mind. And he sent it down the runway. It looked gorgeous. It looked really, really nice. But I was terrified that it was just going to collapse from the weight and through needing more hands.
Yeah.
What I had, it was just me, and I had some interns, but that's not, I needed an army of workers to help me fix this bow in place in time. And I got it done, but I had to leave some stitches because I couldn't, there wasn't time to get to it. It's fine. And I'm like, I don't know, it's quite heavy, the bow, it might just collapse. Looking down the runway. So I was literally like that the whole way through until it came back.
So now that you're thinking about this in hindsight, you say 72 hours without sleep. That is very intense. That is 24 hours without sleep is already, 10 hours without sleep is already, kind of like edgy, but 72 hours, that is very intense. So when you're looking back at that moment and that entire period and the before and the after and the during, how do you look at it? Do you look at it with, how do you look at it? Let me just allow you to describe how you would look at it.
I'm proud that I got through it. I don't think I could do that now, to be honest. I'm literally a 10-hour day person now. But I can't. I struggle to work all night because the eyes are, when you're younger, it's only really old, but the eyes are going now at nighttime, and like, yes, I wear glasses, but it's just like there's a cutoff point now. I have to stop. I get to a point where I can't actually see that, and it gets shadowy with the light. So I sort of force myself to stop now. Whereas back then I was younger, had a lot more energy. I could do that. It wasn't very nice when you're going through that. It's awful. I think it's the sheer adrenaline. To get it finished was what was sort of, I was so sort of like pumped from adrenaline. I was so stressed because I'm like, it's never going to stay. I don't think it's going to stay in place.
I know how that feels. It feels as if you're on crack all the time. And it kind of it's weird because the moments that I felt that, that you're not doing any good to your physical or mental health, but there is some part of you that's just like, we're gonna do this.
It was like some strange camaraderie. Whoever was there, and Richard would be right next to me, bless him. And he's the only designer I've ever met who would literally be there doing the same thing too and trying to help. Everyone else would go like 10 p.m. but he would, because that was his baby. This was his show, and he was new to the London scene at the time. And he was, I respected that because he was there too, and trying, it just felt like, okay, he's here with me, so that's good. He's trying, it just felt better. I felt better for that. But it still doesn't ease the, I needed a week, probably 2 weeks after that to sort of recover and get my legs circulation going again from standing in the same position.
I can imagine.
I had really like frozen legs from being in the same position, really stiff. But you rest and you recover after. That was always what I loved about it, is that we were given the time to recover then afterwards.
Okay, well, I'd like to talk about a book you've written, and it's called Pattern Cutting Techniques for Ladies Tailoring.
Yes.
And well, I have a few questions about that. When in your career, let's say, did you make the decision to write the book, and when did you actually write the book?
I think it was towards the end of the 2000s. I used to have a blog, a very sort of ancient blog now compared to the platforms that we have.
Is
now.
it still up?
It's not. I can't find it anymore. But I have my original Vimeo account that I set up, and it was free. I'm locked out of it.
Oh.
So all the videos that I posted for some of the pieces that I made in the book are still there. They're a little bit home video because that was the time.
Yeah.
I didn't have I didn't even have a BlackBerry then when I was doing videos, and there's a bit of a dodgy haircut on my side, but they're randomly still there under Joe Baker. So that's like how it started was, I guess I had a blog where I was just sort of posting little free classes. I used to call them the bespoke tailoring process. And it was a shoulder that I was really keen to develop because it came from an old 1930s women's blouse construction where they used to have epaulets cut into the blouses that the girls would wear. I was like, oh, I love that. I want to do that on a blazer. And so I developed that, and I started filming it with a really archaic flip share camera. So because it's so easy now with the iPhone, like to do anything like this. So back then I was doing that and then having to edit it. And then I had a Vimeo account under Joe Baker, which was my UK account, and it's still up and running. That I didn't post anything else because I got locked out. I have a new Vimeo account now, which is fine, but that one is still up, and that one shows pretty much me making that particular style from the book. So that's quite interesting because it's not just the cutting system, but it's also the tailoring system. But anyway, sorry, I digress. So it started from the fact that I was blogging, and the blog, I lost that over the years because I think I subscribed to it because it was like an ancient platform and it was really expensive. And in the end, I lost it. But the Vimeo account is still active because that particular one was free. So it started there, and then I was approached by a publisher who had seen the original blog, and who had said to me, "Would you be interested to put this together in a book, basically?" And honestly, I was like, yes, absolutely. I'm really I love writing, and I've always wanted to organize, I think, or capture a moment in time in a book. And I think that's what I wanted because I mentioned I was so inspired by like out of print vintage cutting books that I collect through the years, whether it's at antique fairs or whether it's searching eBay. I would collect these really old books. I actually loved the idea of having something that sort of captures that time. And that was in 2010, which is when I took the project on and started organizing the everything into a book for pattern cutting. I explained to them about the tailoring stuff, and they were like, "We actually really want you to do the cutting." So I was like, "That's fine." A little bit more complicated, but yeah, that's fine. I think it's harder to document cutting because there's so much that is all down to fitting and trial and error as well. So trying to put that into a system was hard, and I still. I'm definitely still evolving that and would love to do, and I'm doing new editions of those systems and trying to post them through a channel now because I just think it's easier.
Yes. So, I don't know if bespoke tailors these days write a lot of books. I mean, I haven't seen many bespoke tailors from our kind of like age now, or our time period, kind of like publishing book after book after book. Whereas, a few years, maybe 100 years ago, so many books were published on cutting systems and drafts and sewing techniques and I don't know, couture techniques and all of that. How did you find the process of taking everything that you have in your mind and in your intuition and kind of like in your hands, more or less, and articulating that into a written format that would be not only readable by others who don't know anything about what you know, but also understand it and actually follow it and successfully develop? How did that process go for you?
I think I just had to break it down into tasks, really, or chapters, I think is the best way. Because the thing is as well, I don't just use flat pattern cutting. I also mix in draping, a little bit of draping, a little bit of native pattern cutting. So it was really hard for me to be like, okay, but I need to give a basic system first and a foundation as well. So I managed to narrow it down to 10 chapters, and that organizational thing of organizing it all came, like the Anna Sui bit, all the organization sort of snapped in at that moment. Because I was like, okay, I have to organize all this knowledge into some sort of order, because I think you have to learn a bit on the job as well. So trying to put it all in a book is hard without someone being able to ask questions and having a one dialogue like what we're having.
Yes.
So I think, this is going to be tough because, it is going to be tough, but I tried to break it down into small tasks. I definitely think I could do another edition to evolve it and kind of make it easier, maybe perhaps as well. I think we all need to evolve and improve, and I think I could definitely do another version. I get asked to a lot to do another one, so maybe if I get full creative control, I will. But yeah, organizing it was like, okay, I have to go through the basics. So I have to start where I approached it where I started, and I was like, okay, I have to start with the style and developing a style and developing individuality and exploring what it means to have style and what that is. So I started with style, and then I think I went into tools, just the tools that you need. And then throughout, I sort of went into measurements, size codes, what you need to draft a flat pattern. And then I gave a basic block, a sleeve block. And then I did a chapter, which I could have done 3 volumes on, but had to consolidate it into.
What chapter was that?
The style variations.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So then I had to, like, for that, I was talking about different styles of cutting. So that's double-breasted, different shoulders, different heads, different fits, different wraps. So that's where I sort of went more into what I consider to be basic cutting style variations. And then I did from sort of a block to a pattern, taking your drafts and making it into a functioning pattern so you can use it and place it on cloth. And then draping, because that's a huge part of what I do for the creative side. Sometimes I'll just drape it on the mannequin just to get the proportion that I want very quickly, and then transfer it onto a flat pattern. So I did a very quick drape on the stand, like a draping section, to sort of explain that as well. And I think it's a shame because I was so restricted by page limits.
Did the publisher give you a limit? Okay.
It was very structured. And I think that's what bothered me, because I had different ideas for it. Even though the content's great, I from a design point of view, I wasn't overwhelmed by it, if I'm speaking with honesty. But I saw it as more of a technical coffee table book where it had a beautiful cover. I wanted to get the Helmut Newton Foundation involved, very sort of grand ideas that eventually got sort of trickled down because of cost page limits. And then I wanted to have full creative control of the layouts, the page numbers, because I would have given it all. I would have put it all in there.
Yes.
And had to edit stuff out. I had to edit stuff out that was really important, because it's like, well, you know, if someone has that question, it's like, that's that question.
This is a very, very interesting part. So I assume that your editors were looking at what you had written and they said, oh, this has to be shorter, this has to be like this. So my question would be, how do they edit a book on tailoring, whereby you're giving sort of instructions and very specialized instructions without knowing, and I could be wrong about this, but without knowing as much as you know about the subject? How do they edit something like that?
I think they were just suggesting sections to take out, like, because the style variations in particular, I wanted to cover tailcoats, morning coats as well. In that whole, I had a lot. I mean, I could cover 3 volumes, I feel like, through all those different things that I wanted to add in. And they were just like, has to go, has to go. Don't need this. I wanted to drape a 2-piece sleeve. I draped a 1-piece because I think it's easier for beginners to start there.
Yeah.
And then they were like, they cut the 2-piece sleeve out. So, you know, it was just tough from that point of view. And then the layouts, I wanted to lay it out differently to make it easier to follow. You know, the actual, some of the images were like a few pages ahead of the instructions, which I did were practical when you're like looking at something. And also I wanted full creative control of the graphic design, because I am a designer and I was working at Calvin at the time, and I was putting together concept digital decks as part of my daily sort of job. And so I was good at it, actually. I'm very good at that, which is another skill set in InDesign, in Illustrator. So I was not, they didn't want me involved with that part of the process. They just wanted the content, and then they took the content and put it together how they saw it, and didn't really want me to have much say at all. They just wanted me to check that it was correct. So I think I did the project again. I would only do more books if I could have full creative control.
I see. And publish it yourself, probably, maybe even.
Maybe publish it myself, or now I just think the channel is the more sort of hip way to approach it, because there's no end to it. Although there's a side of me that still loves that old world, and I would love to have created this beautiful hardback book with amazing photography and amazing images that are as visual references for inspiration, for style, and then systems. So it's more of an artsy approach to a how-to book rather than a regular how-to book. I wanted to make it more beautiful and creative. That's who I am. But really, they just wanted a sort of standard how-to book, which is fine. It does the job. As it, I think I had these sort of like pipe dreams of it being this sort of beautiful coffee table book that you buy at an art gallery with all these beautiful styles in. It wasn't that.
if you look at everything you've done so far, from the moment you began tailoring and learning about the techniques and all of that, and all your experiences up till today, how much of an impact have tailoring books had on your development? How much did you learn from tailoring books in general?
Do you mean tailoring techniques or cutting techniques?
Well, both. Let's say cutting books, systems, but also techniques on this is how you can apply the edge tape on this area. This is how you can do this pocket. This is how you can do that. Kind of like a bit of a holistic approach.
Well, for tailoring techniques, none. I sort of always sort of trusted my own ability, especially at university. I used to work on my own pieces, and yes, you'd have technicians who could show you things, but I think that I just sort of was maybe naturally quite good at it, I suppose. And then after working with Andrew, I felt like that was enough for me, because then I would take that and do what I wanted to do with it for what I
Yeah,
what
and generalize over all the other parts of the garment, probably. Yeah.
yeah. So tailoring books, no. Cutting systems, yes.
All
As
right.
I'm really interested in cutting through last century, really through the decades, and studying different systems of, I guess, costume is the best way to categorize it. But I like to study these books. See, I don't need to study it step by step. It's just to sort of look at it, because I've got to that point now where it's like I just look at it and I'm like, I know, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't need to go step by step like a student or a beginner would do.
Yeah.
But I can just look at something quite quickly and figure out how to do it now, because once you've had enough experience and experimentation and messing around, then it just becomes, it's funny, it just all slots into place. You don't get nervous anymore about, I remember those days well where I was still a young tailor and nervous about, is this right, is this not right, and have I done this right? But it's like, I remember those feelings back in the day, but it's just got to a point now where I've just done so much that it just sort of, I'll just do it like this, I'll do it like this. And I might reference something in an old naval book, an old men's navy book from the 50s. And then I'll go to a women's dress design book from the 30s.
Yeah.
And then a Victoriana cutting book where I say the word steal the cutting lines for some of the fitted, some of those really shaped panels. Sort of stayed with me from looking at the Victoriana books where everything was so fitted and cinched in the waist, and taking that into menswear, and obviously taking that into women's wear too, but playing with proportions and wide shoulders, but then having this crazy cinched waist. So there's a bit of everything in there, and I would say cutting, yes. I would say tailoring, no, because I just sort of, once I had the basics from what I learned at college and university, and then working with Andrew, I had enough ammunition, so to speak, to sort of then proceed and sort of play around more and learn on the job and get the experience that you need over time, and working with designers obviously tests that experience, because you're doing very, very different things, and things that you immediately think, oh, you can't do that. And then, it's sometimes it's an inner battle with your own mind as to like, well, actually, let's just have a go. Let's see.
Let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just see. Let's drape it. Immediately, you're like, oh, nervous, because you're like, I don't think I can do this and do this well. So I'm going to say it can't be done. But that's like years ago. But now I'm just like, I'm just going to drape it and see how it looks. It doesn't look fun. Drop it and do something else. And I can say, look, I've draped it. I don't think it's going to work because of this. And show it to them. So it's like, drape it is very fast for me. So I can drape and communicate that way to show a shape. But most of the time, I figure it out. It's funny. You just do.
Well, I guess that's, when you reach a level of mastery, you have so many references in your mind that, and you also know the materials and how to work with the materials. And you've got so many references of techniques. And as soon as you just touch the garment, you just playfully kind of like move forwards. Until you are really proven that this is just impossible. And even then, there is always something you kind of like work out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people you either want to put the time in or you don't. And some tailors, they're happy like making like the classic bespoke tailoring, and then some tailors like myself, and it sounds like you as well, like that sort of that innovation part, the progression part of sort of pushing something to a different level. And I find that there's a solution, is what I've learned over the years, that, all those early fear that I had in my youth now is dissipated, because it's like, there's always a solution to something. Or you modify the idea a little bit, and then it triggers another idea too when you do that as well. So it's all part of the process of development and creation, I think.
Yes. Well, I always ask myself the question, if it would make itself, how would it make itself? and then I just kind of like take it from there. And it's weird because I distance them myself from how would I approach it. In how would the material, so how would the material make itself? And then I'll just stand by and I'll just have a look in my mind, kind of like how it's doing that. But do you think that in writing everything you already knew, you actually understood what you already knew, even on a deeper level? Kind of like you separated all the noise kind of a bit, or you dug deeper a bit in some of the things that you already kind of like knew but hadn't explored enough. How was that?
I actually think at the time I felt like it was quite accomplished, but actually now I still think it could be deeper and more evolved. I still think there wasn't enough in there to sort of document it all, but maybe I would have liked to, I mean, this is again the times, I would have liked to have given maybe some sort of DVD with it, so you could have had the masterclass as well. I mean, again, like showing the time, it's like
well, I'm glad you didn't say VHS.
no, exactly, yeah. But I do feel ancient even saying DVD now. Online and YouTube and channels. So I do feel ancient saying that, but I did think at the time, well, maybe it could have that with it, and then you could show how each piece is made, and then you're talking about some of the key cutting points that you've been drafting, and then you're seeing how it goes together. That's like, I mean, that would have been a great body of work, but again, like, no full, when you don't have full creative control, you're limited and restricted to stay within that structure as a publishing house.
Okay. Let's do speed round. I have a few things that I've written as we have been talking. I'll just say them, and you tell me in one word the first thing that comes up your mind.
Oh no! It's like that psychological test that you have to do.
No. It's just it's just a bit of fun.
She's a nutter.
Well, I am also a nutter, so that's okay.
Okay.
From a nutter to nutter. Most influential person.
Ooh, Marlene Dietrich.
All right. Okay. If you could make 3 changes to the bespoke tailoring industry right now, and you had a magic wand, what would those 3 changes be?
Oh my God, I don't know. 3 changes. To be a bit more open-minded. I think the possibility of new open-minded. You said one word though, didn't you? You
can say three words.
Okay. Open-minded, or freedom.
Yeah.
I think no rush jobs, but that's a few more words. I think the rush jobs, the speed, there's been a change. I'm sorry, I'm explaining it, and I'm not doing.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I think that it's changed a little bit to sort of speed up tailors for a more ready-to-wear sort of approach to bespoke, and I think that's the wrong approach. So I think I would change the speed, freedom of mind, and I think more, what's the word? More showcasing of everyone involved in the project, and that's
right.
not.
Yeah, that's a very important part, and I know exactly what you mean. A lot of time, people didn't even know the name of the finishers, or some there is some, and they have weird names as well. Like John the Buttonholer. It's like, who the hell is John the Buttonholer? That's not a name, So anyway, I understand fully what you mean. Okay. What do you think 3 qualities of a true master?
I think patience.
Okay.
Experience and perseverance. I think you have to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wisdom. Yeah.
Wisdom. Yes. Most difficult thing in tailoring?
Is that for me personally, or just
yes.
personally? I think trying to do lightweight cloths, fully hand canvassed. I found systems to sort of try and overcome that, but it is sort of merging sort of more ready-to-wear techniques. But I think when you go down to, say, 6-ounce, very lightweight cloths, it lend itself to those techniques by hand, because it shows every bubble, every indentation of stitch. And I think the customer is so used to seeing clean, ready-to-wear lightweight suits that it's an adjustment to sort of look a lightweight suit in bespoke. So I try to sort of always keep it sort of cloth friendly for the techniques that I'm using. Because it can, there's sometimes you can't avoid having a little bubble here and there, and you shrink it and you get rid of it, and then sometimes because it's just so light, it'll just come back over time. Wear, and it's just because it hasn't been block fused the way that most ready-to-wear suits are constructed. More, it's just a different construction technique to what Savile uses.
It's so funny you say that, because when we are trying to really get good at making something, we try to make it as neat as possible, right? It's almost as if we want to do what the machine does. And then at the same time, in our industry, at least in our industry, what the machine does is usually associated with cheap, quick and dirty manufacturing. And so there is a clash of, hey, the standards are kind of like now determined by the cheap machine, but then you don't want to be associating yourself with a cheap machine. So then you're like, I'm trying to do what this machine does, but this machine is doing cheap but clean work. So what does that make my work if I'm trying to aspire to reach that level? It's a weird conundrum. It's as if Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci would work their ass off to get to the level that they got, but then there's this factory that's just making like masterpieces it's a weird thing, right?
In a few days, and that's the difference. But I think a lot of it is about education. When educating your customers and your clients, I think it's important to communicate the process from day one, and I think it's important to be very clear when selecting fabric about what lends to the bespoke process. And they're absolutely adamant that they want this lightweight cloth. I can make that for them very, very well, but I have to lend, to some techniques like block fusing, which help immediately eradicate bubbles, gets rid of it. But it's still all fully hand canvassed and still all constructed in the same way. But I will then take that technique and bring it in. But I think it's just educating your customer. And if they want the full bespoke process, which is this sort of Rolls-Royce industry of the beautiful craftsmanship, then I think it's about educating them on what works for it, because when this craft came around, that the cloths were heavier. Like we all used to wear a lot more clothes and they were much more heavier, and now everything's gone so much more lighter, and it's about lightweight layers and these sort of very clean suits. And that's a different entity, I think, to bespoke. Because yes, you can still make, of course, you can still make lightweight suits and bespoke. I'm not saying you can't, but I just think you have to educate the customer and just tell them that this fabric is 6 ounce and is going to bubble like crazy over wear and over time. You'll have to keep pressing it. It will look re-creased. If you like that, that's fine. But I'm just educating you on what the properties of this particular fabric are, and then you should think about going up a couple of ounces, not to like a heavy like coat weight, but just sort of maybe go up a little bit, because it will help the structure and help the coat hang. Unless you want me to lend and bring some ready-to-wear techniques, and if they're fine, it's a dialogue, it's a discussion.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it's educating your clients. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time with my clients that I have, they're coming to me because they want this certain cut, and I don't think they care what I do, but I still give them the full bespoke experience. Sometimes I might block fuse a front if they've gone for a super light gabardine because of the color. That, you know, getting the colors, they're always in gabardine, and then that's something that, you know, needs to be made very carefully by hand. And then can still bubble over time. But, you know, sometimes my clients come to me because they're like, I want that color, I want that cut. And yes, I'm hand making it still. I'm still basting canvases in. I'm still hand felling, hand buttonholes. Still, it's all the same process, but I'm sort of tweaking the system to give them what they want. And they're aware of the process. I educate them in that as well, because that's your role. I suppose I don't see myself as a cutter. I see myself as the person who's making the whole. I cut
the whole thing. Yes,
I do the whole thing. So, but that is the process of whoever is in front of the client. That's their job, to educate, inform them, give them examples. You know, show examples of a lightweight bespoke suit and a heavier weight bespoke suit. If they want those structured shoulders, you know, you need fabric with some body in it, you know, to help the shape and the structure. You know, it's going to cause no end of problems in a lightweight, because it's just going to bubble everywhere because of the amount, the crafted shoulder pads you need to go in as well. So there's a lot of education, and I really believe in that, in educating the client, and I think actually they appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that brings the overall quality of the industry. It raises the overall quality of the industry, because one of the things that I'm kind of like very much advocating for, similar to what you're saying, is I don't mind if clients become more demanding in the sense of quality. You know, not demanding in the sense of just kind of like complaining all the time, but really being able to see the mistakes that a professional trained eye would be able to see, because then no one can, you know, no one can then tell them weird nonsense stories about, oh, that mistake is actually is supposed to be there, or you know just messing around. And I think that overall just gives a better it introduces new standards from a different perspective, and that's from the client's perspective, not the tailor anymore. But okay, let's continue. So, tailoring in America.
Tailoring in America, well, it exists, and there's definitely a thriving business for it. I have found that it's in LA specifically, it's more ready-to-wear oriented rather than bespoke. No one wants to wait for the time for it unless you want to make it super quick. And most of the time, unless I really need the job, I sort of say no, because I don't need it. And I want to sort of stay true to my craftsmanship and my trade, and still spend that time to do a work of art. Like some of the pieces I've made, not all of them, but some of them, you know, it's like a month for one piece.
Yes, yeah. I can imagine.
I'm sure coat makers are rolling their eyes on Savile Row. It's the truth.
Yeah. Well, you're doing the whole thing yourself as well. You know, you're not just putting side seams together and a few shoulders.
Yeah. And they're very special pieces as well. So obviously it's a different story for a more classic blazer. But for those, I'm talking about those very sort of special pieces with clever cutting details, shoulder proportions. There's a lot of work that goes into just the pad and building up those shoulders and keeping it there and fixing it all. It's like hours and hours and hours of work. So it's just it's a different mindset to Savile Row. It's more couture in that sort of sensibility.
Okay. In one word.
I'm not very good at that.
The fashion industry.
Well, what I want to say, I'm not going to say, so I have to think of something else.
Okay.
not offensive, but
well, you could say whatever you want. There is no censorship here.
I would say to be optimistic, innovation, because it is. It is always trying to create newness.
Yes.
But what bothers, I'm sorry, I'm explaining again. You
Go
can
for
tell
it.
I'm a writer.
That's okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry. You said one word, but with fashion, what bothers me is that it's all a lot of trend driven, and there's a lot of copying, and that's why I get fed up a little bit with fashion, because I want people to keep innovating and keep progressing. And I think because there's a lot of copying happening because of the tight schedule and calendars to churn around collections every 6 months, then I think everyone's put under a lot of pressure to create quickly again. So I love the innovation of it, but I just think I don't like the trend element of it, and the fact that everyone goes to similar stores to wear the same clothes, so there's not much originality in that sense. Even though you're innovating new things, at the end of the day, for ready to wear, it's still going to a store to be sold globally, so people have those pieces throughout the world. Which then brings me back to bespoke tailoring, where I'm like, I love the originality of that.
Yes.
So I'm very conflicted, I think, in because I love the innovation of fashion and the development of newness, but then I hate the distribution of it, because hate is a strong word, but I dislike the distribution of it, so that like then everyone's shopping in the same places online or in stores, and then there's no individuality coming through. It's what these people, the designers, all the brands are dictating to you to wear, I guess. And then from that, you sort of create clones, I feel like, for a brand or a designer. So I'm wondering whether, I love the originality of bespoke tailoring, but then these sort of classic pieces, individual to a customer's fit.
Where can people find you and get in touch?
I answer messages on Instagram. I try to answer everything. Sometimes I miss things because I'm busy, but most of the time I will see it on Instagram. I guess I do have a channel, but it is subscriber now, because I did the free channel for so many
Is that the
years.
one on Patreon?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So
and that you're teaching on that channel as well. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, and I can do 1-to-1, which is the maximum tier.
Yeah.
But the subscriptions, they start at like $5, and there's access to new. It's all new, no affiliation with the book, just brand new content specific for the channel. My system's evolved and where they've come in the last decade since that, and that's it. But I'm teaching through it. I think it's a great way to sort of instill passion into the next generation. I'm trying to train kids to think about clothes and look at clothes and have some perseverance and patience. Things worth doing on achieved in a month or two or a year.
Yes.
You have to put in the time, and if you're not prepared to put in the time, maybe it's not for you. I think you have to really love what you do and be passionate about it, because if you don't, it's tough to be in this business, I think.
Well, on that note, Jo, it's been a fantastic conversation. I've enjoyed every second of it, and I have many more topics that I would like to cover, but we will need a lot more time. But perhaps
I'd love to stay in touch.
we'll do a follow up, and maybe when you're in London, or if I don't travel that much, but if you are in London, I would love to see you and continue the dialogue, let's say.
Yeah, where is your studio in London?
In Battersea at the moment.
In Battersea, okay.
Yes.
I'm planning to be around in the summer, so I will definitely let you know, and we can go and grab coffee and have a chat.
Sounds fantastic. And that was Jo. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you'd like to see more of Jo, or you'd like to get in touch with her, check out the links in the description of this video to her Instagram, website, and Patreon channel. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please let us know, and I hope to see you again in the next episode. Until then, bye-bye.